this is my persuasive speech on why you should tip your server for my oral interpersonal communications class. In today's society, at least 1 in 10 Americans are employed at a restaurant, which basically means that at least one of your friends that you have is surviving solely on tips that they're making in a restaurant. To broaden it even more, there are 12.9 million Americans working in restaurants every day. So it is so important that you make sure you are tipping your servers properly because they are surviving solely on these tips that you leave them. In America today, there are 970,000 eating and drinking places at least, which totals out to be 632 billion sales a year in just 2012. In just the state of Wisconsin, every $1 million spent in our state creates 31.5 additional jobs. Over 261,400 people in the state of Wisconsin are employed at a restaurant, which makes up to be 9% of the employment population. While so many people are working at these restaurants, it's definitely not easy. The average salary a server makes is $2.33 an hour plus tip, which is before tip out. When you tip out, it's usually about 2% for bartenders. Doesn't matter how many drinks they serve you or how many drinks your tables order. 1% for bussers, 1% for hosts, and 1% for the expo, which dishes out your food for you to bring to your tables. At the end of the night, that really takes a chunk out of the tips that you've made. It adds up. Server checks also are typically not very much money. For someone like me who only works about 2 nights a week, I close both those nights, so it's about a 6-hour shift. They're usually about $20 every 2 weeks. For other people who work full-time or even part-time more than I do, their checks usually average from about $5 to $150, give or take, depending on how much they work and how much they're making during their shifts. An average salary for a server is usually between $9,600 and $30,000, depending on the economy. Another hard thing about working in a restaurant is the availability. You are required to work nights and weekends, and usually most holidays. At my restaurant that I work at, the only holiday that they give everybody off is Christmas Day. Otherwise, they're open year-round. The shifts are long, and most restaurants close really late, which is hard if you have a family, if you're in school, which most servers are in school. If you don't have proper transportation, if you don't have a car, it'd be really hard to get back really late if you're closing. Also, it depends on how long you have to travel. After closing really late, it would be really hard to drive a half an hour home. Now, to make my most important points of this speech is how you should tip. Some would think that as a social rule, you could say that you should at least tip 15% always, but those are usually people who have worked in a restaurant or know someone who has worked in a restaurant that taught them how to tip. Some people come into the restaurant and usually tip between 0 to 10%, which is very discouraging after you've worked your butt off to make their dining experience enjoyable. Doesn't seem to matter for some people because some people just don't have the money to tip. And I feel that if you don't have the money to tip, you should not go out to a sit-down restaurant because it's not fair for someone who is making their money off of tips. However, it is always great when you get that one table who leaves you the 20% tip or even more. It's very rewarding to know that someone appreciates the work that you're doing and your service that you're giving them. Some things that might help you receive these good tips is making sure their drinks are full, making sure they have napkins, pre-bussing their dishes that they're done with, making sure their food is hot, being very friendly with your tables, but those are just a few. Serving can be a very stressful job. If the customers are unappreciative of the job you are doing, it can feel very unrewarding. Customers need to remember that servers are living off of what you are tipping them. You need to tip your server, especially when they deserve it.